Mulberry Talent Partners Leadership Conversation. My name is Kelsey Daly, and I am the Talent Acquisition Specialist here at Mulberry. So a little bit about Mulberry. We are a full-service staffing and recruiting agency headquartered in Portland, Oregon, with an office in the Silicon Valley. We specialize in the professional placements of human resources, professional and financial office, payroll, and operations positions with direct hire, temp to hire, and temporary opportunities. I would encourage you to check out our website at mulberrytalent.com to see all of our current suite offerings and as well as stay in the loop on upcoming leadership conversations. So jumping into introductions, we are joined by our fabulous founder and president, Lauren Francis, and by Jeff Eyman. So Lauren started Mulberry back in June of 2017 and comes with over 25 years of talent acquisition experience. We're also joined by Jeff. He is a veteran of 30 plus years in human resources leadership roles in the high tech and transportation industries. Jeff started a consulting business, JLE Business Solutions, LLC, in 2021, focused on partnering with organizations, leaders, and HR professionals on talent attraction, development, and retention of talent in this new world shaped by a global pandemic. So we'd like today to be super interactive, so do not shy away from using the Q&A function on Zoom, and we'll try to get to any and all questions that come in. So without further ado, I'd like to pass it off to Lauren and Jeff.
Hey, Jeff, welcome
Lauren.
back. And so happy to have you back and for our second part in our three-part series.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think I said this before, when I met Jeff, I knew immediately that I wanted to stay in touch with him. I learn a lot from Jeff every time I speak with him. He's a great resource, and I feel just so blessed to have you, first of all, for our Mulberry audience, but more importantly, as a friend. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, feelings mutual. Thank you, Lauren.
Great. So what are we talking about today?
We're talking about hybrid work. So this is the second part of a three-part series on dealing with the war on talent. And I mentioned in the first session, you know, a phrase that was coined in the late 90s for a totally different reason. But, you know, the war on talent now is a totally different ball game, and really an unknown if you take even through the end of this year, what that's going to look like in terms of back at the office and hybrid work and all of that. So we're going to focus this time on hybrid work. And I think what's important, I think probably the most important thing with hybrid work is what you and how the company defines it internally. That becomes your language for your employees. And I'll give you an example of how different companies are defining it. So at the macro level, some companies are defining it as, if I use a percent, it's the percent of people that are fully working remotely and those that are fully working in the office. So they're basically saying, as a company, we're having hybrid work because we have some people working full-time at home or off-site and full-time in the office. And if people feel that is their definition, but that's not what you want to do, you got to make sure that you really define it, because the other definition is based on an individual employee. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the term, I don't even remember when hybrid, I don't remember if it was even a term before, I don't think it was before COVID. You know, it was really work from home, off-site, telecommuting, and now we're talking more in terms of how to meet the needs of applicants, candidates, our employees. But I think the one that's used most often is where an employee is going to work, let's say, 2 days at home or 3 days at home or 4 days, whatever it might be, and then the rest of it on site. And when I mean on site, that would be where their normal workplace would have been unless they've moved and such. So I think on that note, and it's what companies are doing now with their employees, is really starting to define that. And there's probably some resistance to change for those that would rather be 5 days at home and never having to commute or go into the office. But at the end of the day, it's about meeting customer needs. It's about productivity. It's about all of those things that the organization does to exist. And the last thing I'd say on it is, you know, this terminology of the Great Resignation, I don't think is an event. I think that continues to be a process, because this type of work is the type of work that we're going to look at going forward. It's a redefinition of what work is. And the very last thing I'd say on that comment is that it is about trust and respect, because we're working with adults, we're working with people that have their own needs. And so this blanket approach of saying all of these employees now work 3 days at home, 2 days at work, people are going to ask why. And so the organization, number one, has to have the definition of what they mean by hybrid work, the expectations, and then what the goal of that is going forward.
Wow, that's a lot.
That's a lot. It's, if you think about it, the definition of work, over time, it's changed a little bit. Before COVID, if an individual was to ask to telecommute, they would have signed more than likely a document of, an agreement that says, here's what I'm going to do, here's what I agree to. That didn't happen with COVID.
Yeah.
It was just all of a sudden companies had to respond to getting people out of the workspace, the ones they could, right? Because there's still essential businesses that have people that are working with customers on a daily basis. And there's certain jobs that you can't do from home. The knowledge type of work that happens can be done at home. But if I'm repairing a truck or a car or a computer, I've got to be physically present to be able to do that. But I think the biggest part that is concerning to people, and it used to be called the water cooler, conversations. But if you think about it, when there's a meeting, most of trust and respect is happening outside of that meeting. It's debriefing on the meeting, it's talking in the hallway. And so the question is, and that's very informal. And so the question is, if you continue to have people work from home, how do you engage them in the same type of rapport they would have had before? And that really has to be a conscious decision if that's what the organization wants, is that level of rapport. And so that's what I'd say on that.
Mm-hmm.
Kelsey, do you have a question?
Yeah, we had a question come in.
Great.
So question is, in hybrid models, how can we help potential candidates that might be seeking 100% remote work still see the value in coming into the office part of the time?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do have a mixture of employees that were, in the organization at the start of COVID and remain in the organization, and we've been addressing their needs. We've had the people that we've hired since then and meeting their needs. And a lot of cases that was full remote. Now we're again going into a transition where it might be hybrid. And again, hybrid being a percentage of the time in the office and a percentage of time offsite. And I think the company has to be realistic that when you advertise a position as remote, I noticed that there's some people doing fully remote, partial remote, to be very clear in the job posting of what they mean by that. The second thing I'd say is that the hiring manager and whoever, it's a talent acquisition specialist, whoever's doing the communication with the candidate about the structure of the company, the values, whatever, have to be really clear on the why. Because if anyone's going to ask a question, it's going to be the next question that should follow is how. How does this? And I think if you're telling current employees that it's going to be hybrid, and you're telling candidates in the same job, don't worry about it, it's fully remote, and then try to change that over time, it's just going to be very unsettling. So at some point, organizations have to start talking about what partial remote means. And if they commute and come into the office and still wonder why they're doing it and what benefit is, and there's nothing designed around that type of work, and let's say they're in meetings, Zoom meetings all day, and they've driven into work for that, you're going to have a retention issue as well. So retention and attraction, back to this hybrid, really important of how you define it and the why that you're working this model that way, because every company has to compete for talent. But at the same time, you have to meet the customer needs, and you have to align those things about why you're doing the work the way you're doing it. So I hope that answers the question. If there was another layer to it and the person wants to ask that part of it, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I'm hearing from a lot of business owners and leaders is that it's a lot of it too has to do with the engagement and the sense of community with the workforce. And so for like Mulberry, for example, we work 2 days in and 2 days out. So we're in the office Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and we're working remotely at the end of the week. And I like that because we just get, I don't know, the weeks feel shorter for some reason. I mean, I love what I do, but at the end of the day, you want the week to, kind of come to a close. But we do it very specifically those days so that people know what their schedules are. And we do it because there is a lot of community and collaboration that go into the work that we do. And without that, we're not doing the best we can for our clients and our customers and our candidates. So there's the why, there's the reason for it. I'm also hearing that a lot of people are saying to me, the people that wanted the remote model, which is, everybody has different needs and why and so on. But a lot of people are saying to me, please don't, no remote for me, or I need to be back with people. A lot of people are experiencing, and they don't know they are, but they're experiencing depression, and also the sense of this connection missing. And so the human connection, which is so important. And so it's not, yes, there's this whole, everything's changed and the why is so important. Yet I'm finding too that a lot of people that wanted the remote are starting to think differently about that. And so that's just interesting to me, how I'm hearing from a lot of candidates now that they don't really want that. Not that that's going to change, but I'm just hearing more of that than I did before.
Yeah, and again, I think we're all figuring this out. This is new, and I think you can't underestimate what companies have been able to do in enlarging their pool of qualified candidates. So where you've hired someone, let's say you're a company in Salem, Oregon, and you've hired someone, and you're able to get somebody from Seattle, let's say, and it's been fully remote and it's working, and then you begin to try to change that. Well, to try to do hybrid on that, the individual would literally have to move to be able to do that. So you have to really think about how we've set it up with individuals. And really, I think, data always is very important. And I think to have, an inventory of what people's work schedules are beyond just the manager of the group, because HR, we've got to look at it across the organization. And, if it's fully remote, if it's a hybrid or fully on site, and make sure we understand the individuals that are in each one of those. Obviously, well, actually, interesting enough, and we'll learn more about this going forward, you take Microsoft and Google, and it's always easy to pick larger companies, but at least it's a baseline in terms of what the thought process is in those large companies. So you have Microsoft that, I think it was 25,000, 30,000 employees that went fully remote, and a great percentage of those employees will remain fully remote. Then you have Google, which is actually changing back to on-site work because of all of the intangibles about feeling a part of a larger organization. It's very difficult to do that. And wherever, we've made up workspaces in our homes, our apartments, wherever that is. In a lot of cases, they're made up workspaces. They're not optimal. And they don't have the ability and the informalness to be able to talk to people. And I think that's what Google more than likely is looking at. Or, you build, the billions of dollars they spent on infrastructure and buildings for a specific reason, it never was designed that way for most of the people working remote. I think as well, and this can be a bit of a touchy subject, is that when you look at remote work and hybrid work, and you look at it from a exempt level position, salaried position, and then non-exempt hourly position, and let's say the non-exempt has been working fully remote. Now there's legal challenges of making sure the time cards are accurate, but now you also have the challenges if that person's going to work partially remote and partially on site. And again, back to that inventory, you need to be very clear of who's doing what kind of schedule. And then more importantly, if myself, Bobby, and Susie are coming in on Wednesdays and everybody else is working from home those days, why are we the three? Yeah. What is there something that we're going to gain by the three of us? Have we thought about that? Because if it's just random, you're going to have people begin to talk and be unproductive about it. So again, this takes more conversation, takes trust and respect. And it means that we've got to talk to individual employees rather than just blasting out emails and putting it on some website.
Absolutely.
Kelsey, I see you're back. You got another question?
Okay, so another question says, as Lauren mentioned, employees' needs and wants are all different, and a lot of employees' needs have changed since COVID happened. What are some trends that you have noticed that candidates are now looking for in companies that might be different from what people might have needed prior to COVID?
Can you ask that one more time?
Okay. What are some trends that you've noticed that candidates are now looking for in companies that might be different from what people might have needed prior to COVID?
I think a lot of it, I mean, I hope I'm answering this correctly, but I feel that candidates are looking for companies that are what Jeff is talking about. There's a reason, there's a business reason, and there is a clear idea about why we're doing what we're doing. And so they want to have that communication, they want that transparency, and they want to understand that it has to make sense to them. And so people are asking more of companies now in many different ways. This is just one way, but it really speaks to what Jeff was talking about, that it has to make sense. It can't be random. And I guess you could say fair, and I guess it also depends on the job that you're doing. But I've noticed too, the trust and respect is a huge thing, because I remember flexibility was something I always wanted in a previous job that I had, and the trust and respect wasn't there from the organization, meaning they did not have that mindset of what I used to, or I refer to regularly as employment for adults, and so people are really looking for companies that trust their employees and feel like there's this, I don't know, this collaboration. Jeff, can you speak to it as well?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is around fairness. Let's think about it this way, like the G&A functions. Let's take HR, finance, IT, just those three organizations. And you let all three of them go off and do it the way they want. You're going to get three different models, three different definitions, three different ways, and you're going to have employees talking. Well, why, an accountant says, why do I have to be in the office more often than the IT person, let's say? So it even is cross-functional in terms of the why. And so, at the top levels down, we need to make sure that we're communicating. This is a big change for people. If they've worked from home and now we're trying to get them back to the office, you can do an edict. I see, some organizations that have set a new date. If you remember early on with COVID, there were dates of when we were coming back to the office, and then that went away with the duration of the pandemic. But now companies are setting dates to say, we'll be fully back in the office on this date. And so between now and that date, you have a retention issue and an attraction issue. So I think more than anything, this concept of fairness, in particular for adults, you can't be perfect, but at the same time, it's the intent and what you're doing. And if it's just all one-way communication from management and HR, let's say, and their edicts saying, here's what we're doing, and it isn't a two-way and a personal approach. I'll give you an example. Let's say all this syncs up with, schools, let's say, and some schools are back, some schools are partial, in a lot of cases with school age children, and probably some people that are watching this or watch it later, talk about coordination, trying to get them, even bandwidth is an issue, within that home. And so we got to make sure we understand what it's going to be. If the ultimate goal is to be in a work of X, how do we get there? And basically saying the date and having no dialogue and no process, that event probably will not go well. And it's great to set a date, no problem with that, but you just got to understand the pros and cons, and two-way communication is real big.
Yeah. Are you seeing any other areas that you can touch on that you think are important? I hear that, hybrid work is here to stay. Do you see it evolving differently as time goes on? Or do you feel like, I'm just curious about what you think.
Yeah, I think when you talk about hard to find talent for an organization and they've been able to find that, let's say better with remote work because now they can have people work in another state, other locations. So if you change from being able to enlarge your pool, you will have an attraction issue because you're pulling your pool, sort of down the funnel further. And there's a great percentage of people that will look for jobs that are fully remote. And
Yeah.
if this is hard to find talent, key talent, whatever you want to call it, you really got to think about that in advance because that's what the company needs in terms of gathering the talent. But I also think too, what I'm seeing is there's conversations about this going on within organizations. But if you ask who's in charge, who owns the back to work, definitions, philosophy, process, all of that. This is a major change management project. And if you're leaving that up to the individual managers to work with their employees on, that's not good for the employees and ultimately not good for your customers at the same time. So I think ownership, the concept of making sure you have an inventory and someone is looking at that centrally. And there's a reason for looking at that. And then you're going to have your one-offs. You always do when you're hiring. You're always going to have one-offs. But I think these one-offs, in the past were around pay or bonus, whatever it might be. Well, you're going to have one-offs now, probably within a department where somebody that you're hiring is going to be fully remote. And you have an individual in that department in the same job that might be hybrid. Again, why? Understanding the why. And by the way, if that person is fully remote and is called top talent and they're not, then you better deal with that pretty quickly because you're setting up a retention issue. And so going forward, not only is attraction still going to be very important, but I think retention, this is going to be a long-term process of retention, because if you have people working remotely, depending on the individual, their level of commitment and their to the larger company or the larger organization it's going to be less than if the individual in the old days, let's say, is working amongst other employees and they see the greater good of what's happening. Pretty hard to see that when you're working from home.
Yeah, and the community is so important. I hear there's a lot of leaders that I'm talking to that basically say, we have community days, like they're all remote now, but they have community days where they open the office on Wednesdays and people that want to come in. And there's a lot of different ways that people are embracing this. There's some companies that are saying, okay, well, I'll do this for now, but this is not what I want. This is like, this is what we have to do now. But, and people can see that. People can see that they're embracing something that they don't really want to, or they want to keep it the way it was. And, there's some of that going on as well. But
yeah, and even if you think about it, back to who's in charge, even from a facility standpoint, the organization may have done something. Let's say you're in a high rise and you've had 5 floors and now you're only going to have 2 floors because you found that the cost is better. Some people are going to work hybrid, and the workspace at work is totally different when people went out. So when people went out, if they had their own cubicle or office, and now that is redefined to be a shared space, with 3 people, let's say, then what is that shared space? How are you going to transition people into that level of change? Not only have you said you need to be at work at the site, but even in the setting, people are going to ask questions and observe, is it going to be the way it was? Or is it going to be something different? And I think that probably, and again, think about what we just said. It's back to communication. It has to be two-way. It has to be what's needed. And by the way, we can't always meet everyone's needs, but we should at least ask, what are the needs?
Yeah.
And just, be really careful about promises that you can't hold. Talk about reducing trust. That will be really big because people are listening to those things. And if they're making inferences about what they think they've heard, and you're not over clarifying, active listening, all of that, you're still going to have a disconnect of what they heard, what they thought, and what's actually. And so we just got to be cognizant that this is a huge change management process for people.
Yeah. Well, we're out of time, but this is such an exciting topic. I'm so glad you're here to help us with what you know and you shared today. This is all very interesting, and we're finding our way.
Yep. Thank you, Jeff and Lauren. We have the third and final part of this 3-part series on March 15th, and this will be talking about the interview process redesign with Jeff. So make sure to tune in for that. And then we will be having some more leadership conversations coming up in the future. So stay in touch about those. And then here's some ways to just stay in touch with us. You can connect with us on LinkedIn. Feel free to shoot us emails, and we'd love to hear from you. And we just wanted to thank you again for choosing to fly with Mulberry. We know you have so many different options when it comes to webinars, and we're so happy that you chose ours. And thank you again, Jeff and Lauren, for an amazing conversation.
Thanks again. Thanks, Jeff, for joining us.